I'll give you an interesting backstory.
All right. I love backstories.
This is as I understand it. And so he and I spent 2 or 3 hours on the phone while he told me the story. But basically, I don't know if you've heard this story or not, but so bear with me. He tells a story that when he was young, his parents immigrated from India. They moved to Canada. When he was 8 years old, he thought he was going to get a bicycle for his birthday. And so he walks in, he's so excited. And his mom says, go see daddy. And he's like, I'm gonna get my bicycle. And I'm all fired up, right? He's an 8-year-old kid. He walks into the dining room or whatever living room area. And his father's putting together a bookshelf. He's like, that does not look like a bike. And there's a giant box on the ground. And his dad goes, open the box. Like, this is your birthday present. He's like, well, that's a small box for a bicycle. He opens it, and it's the entire Encyclopedia Britannica books.
Oh God, that's amazing. That was my.
I had them too.
That was my favorite go-to.
Oh,
when I sat on the naughty chair half my life.
yes, 100%. Except we had the Encyclopedia Americana, and he had the Encyclopedia Britannica. But still, remember? And you would go to the grocery store, and you would get like one set of books like every month or whatever when they came out. Okay. So his dad bought the entire set. Boom.
Boom.
Puts it on the shelf and says, okay, son, this is what you're going to do. Starting with volume 1, book 1, he was to rewrite 10 pages every night. And he would then he'd have to redraw the pictures and everything. He hand wrote the entire Encyclopedia Britannica over the course of the next 5 years at the insistence of his father. And every night he would have to go over what he had written the night before he went to do his next thing.
Next assignment.
Right. So
at the age of 8.
At the age of 8, until he was 13 years old. And he said, he goes like, that was the worst experience that I thought had ever happened to me. And it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. Because I had no idea. It's like human beings can do practically anything. If they understand how the puzzle is sort of put together, there's like no end to what a person can do.
Right.
And he finishes, and he says within 2 months of finishing this task, he says his finger is still crooked from all the writing. He says within 2 or 3 months of finishing this task, his mom gets MS.
Okay.
And he has to go to the doctor's appointments. Okay. And meanwhile, the doctor's like, well, we don't know what causes it. And just that sometimes things work and sometimes they don't. And of course he goes, well, then how do you not know what causes it? It's either, the sensory organ, or it's the nerve, or it's the brain, or somewhere in between. Oh, it's more complicated than that, kid. You just don't understand. And Jay's like, what? So anyway, he becomes an engineer. And what he does really for a living is write computer programs and algorithms to find trends buried deep in data. So like if you had an electric grid and you wanted to save 1 penny per kilowatt hour, you would find where all the bleeds are. You're an engineer, right? So okay, so that's what he does for a living. And he made a lot of money doing that. He started a couple other companies, but in the meantime, he's read almost every neuroscience book, journal from around the world imaginable. Like he gets these to his home, and this is his hobby. He's looking for an answer for his mom.
Right.
He has written hundreds of letters to scientists all over the world because he says, well, he'll see something on MS. It's like half of a story. And he'll write that scientist, dear Dr. So-and-so, my name is Jane Dollywall, and I have a question about such and such. There was a paper 10 months ago about such and such. You said you were going to follow up. Did you ever do so? Blah, blah, blah. And they all write him off. Every single one of those people. They blow him off. You don't know what you're talking about. You're just an engineer, stick to electronics, whatever. And of course, in his mind, the brain is electronic. It's a computer.
100%.
Okay. So he starts getting down to the nitty gritty, following even Eastern medicine.
Yep.
Acupuncture, acupressure, et cetera, et cetera. Like he's trying to put all the pieces together. That's working remotely and the brain somehow figures it out. So, well, how come in MS, like somehow.
Yeah, right.
Right.
They're putting needles in the bottom of the feet, and now all of a sudden they're having their kidney functions improving.
Right? Yeah, crazy, right? So he's like, surely this works. And he decides to invest in the world's largest database for EEGs. Okay. He's like, I'm gonna figure this shit out. Right. So it's 200,000 EEGs. You know how old the people are, what
Yeah,
their disease, what the medicines are, et cetera, et cetera. There's no
it's
name.
just data.
Just data. He buys two supercomputers. He takes the data and does what he does for a living. He looks for trends,
Yeah.
these EEGs. And he discovers independently and on his own that if you have high blood pressure, your brain looks a certain way. If you have high blood sugar, your brain looks a certain way. If you have MS, your brain looks a certain way. If you're perfectly healthy, that's the baseline. Okay. So now he's mapped out the brain. And by the way, none of these other neurologists have ever really done that. It never occurred to them to ever do that.
No, well, they don't think that way. They
They
want
don't think that way. They don't think that way. In terms of anxiety and depression and seizure disorder, it never occurred to them to look for this other stuff.
right.
And so he already kind of knew all this data. He would tell people about it. They would laugh at him. He would feel dejected. He keeps all these letters. He's got a chest
Walter's letters.
from the Anthony Fauci types of this world that are the Soyans, and don't listen to anybody else. So anyway, ultimately, he kind of combined this concept of Eastern medicine on the feet, right?
Yeah.
Just reflexology on the feet.
Start there.
Yeah, let's start there. And realize that certain compressions against the feet, and he obviously won't give details because this is not, it's not patented. No one knows. Jay is the only person who knows.
It's a trade secret.
Yeah, it's trade secret. The algorithm for the computer and the EEG thing, his trade secret. The pattern on the socks to begin with, his trade secret. But he recognized that there was a certain pattern that when he put it on his mother's feet or whatever, normalized the MS pathways in the brain.
Yeah.
Okay. He starts manufacturing socks.
Yep.
And
I met the gentleman. I met Terry, who
Terry
started this
was Terry was one of his first sock guys.
for
Terry,
hockey players.
yes, Terry tells the story. He started selling them to moms on the hockey field.
Yep.
Because it improved balance. Like it was hard to kind of convince adults. For a while, they were selling them through doctors' offices and their patients for balance, older patients. And the Canadian Health Ministry made them stop doing that. They weren't allowed. They couldn't sell socks. So he moved the sock manufacturer to America.
Evil socks.
Evil socks. I mean, whatever. But he says one night he was in bed reading a journal. His poor wife, God bless her. She's such a sweet lady. She's tolerating all this crazy stuff. Anyway, he's like the crazy mad genius. But anyway, he's reading, and there was an article that basically said that that pattern recognition from reflexology works anywhere on the body.
They study and they took the pattern, they did it in the arm, it's back, then and
it worked.
Couldn't do this pattern.
Still the pattern and it worked.
The brain knows.
Yes. And all of a sudden he's like, oh my God, I don't have to sell socks. I could turn this into a patch.
That's right. So it was really the Canadian Health Ministry.
Yeah.
That was.
We can thank for this. Yes.
I mean, I would send a big old thank you card. Thank you so much for pulling my socks.
What I find fascinating, so I love that story. What I love about Jay is that he had the patches made by 3M. He doesn't want anyone poking holes in any of the story. These 3M medical grade that
I interviewed the individual that developed the Post-it note, which is what this is.
3M.
He is my neighbor.
Nice.
Growing up. I mean, that's Minnesota.
Yay.
And it's funny though, because I interviewed him for my master's, and so it was one of my classes, entrepreneurship, and then it was basically, the story behind the 3M Post-it note is that it started because of Bible hymns.
Yeah.
Because when you in church, and then you open it, and then you turn this one, and then if you add the little pieces of paper, they fall out and whatnot.
Yeah. to keep it from falling.
So that was actually a mistake of adhesive.
And
That was then turned into little pieces of paper with this glue on there for Bible hymns, which then turned into, they literally, that was going to fail like 3 times, to the point where the gentleman that developed it goes, if you're going to can this project,
yeah,
he goes, can I have it? Because I quit.
Yeah.
And then his boss goes, you believe in this product that much that you would quit 3M to go continue with this pathway? He goes, yeah. He goes, okay, that's what we're going to try one more time. One more thing. And then he goes, so that application,
yes,
is the trade secret.
Yeah.
That is why the Post-it note actually sticks, and everything else is not as good.
Yeah.
It didn't occur to me till I had the interview with him.
Yeah.
Was that it was like, wow, okay, well now I know why the Staples ones and the Office Depot ones, and they're all trying to get there with their, but it's all about the application, and the original machine is in this guy's basement.
I love that.
In St. Paul, Minnesota.
I love that.
And I am not, even with my clearance with the military.
No,
I'm not allowed to go see it.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, because think of the money involved, right? So he's been offered lots of money from pharmaceuticals. He refuses to sell. He refuses to have become public and sell shares, because all that means the secret may have to get out, right? But I like the fact that he's using he didn't cut corners. I mean, that's not the cheapest way to get something manufactured, but it's medical grade.
Yeah.
He went to the FDA to register it as a Class 1 medical device. And once you've registered it as a Class 1 medical device, well, now you can do research studies on it. So enter projects like the one you and I are working on.
Yeah.
And of course, and to clarify, just for anybody who's listening to said story, you're never going to be approved by the FDA on a Class 1 medical device, because that's the same thing as an ACE wrap, a pair of crutches, a Band-Aid. The FDA is not going to approve that. It doesn't need approval because anyone can use it. Class 1 basically means anyone can use it. Now, if you see something that's not registered by the FDA, then they are not considered a medical device. So any of the other competitors out there, if they are not registered with the FDA, can never claim to be a medical device. So instantly, they're not the same thing, right? So to give people confidence in like, okay, this is, I'm going to,
Well, I think it's the fact that 2 things. Number one is he didn't need to register because that costs money.
No.
Then number 2 is he doesn't need any studies.
No. But what I love about it,
but if he wants to be disruptive.
Yes. Well, so, and this is not him talking. This is me talking. He has a vision that he would like to have 1 billion people wearing these patches. Now, that 1 billion people comes from the fact he was offered $1 billion for his idea. Yeah. And he thought, the way I can earn $1 billion is to have 1 billion people using it. I'll get $1 profit per patch or, whatever per month. And then that's going to be my money. I don't need to sell to the pharmacy industry because he's certain that they can bury it. My concern when I talked to him, I was like, well, now, Jay, if you can make life better and all these pathways go down to like what's normal.
Yeah.
Right. If you're anxious, goes down to normal to alleviate some anxiety. If you can't sleep, that screwed up sleep pathway goes down to normal so you can sleep. If you've got pain, that pain pathway is brought back to normal so you're not in pain. So that's how the things alleviate symptoms. I was like, can't you invent a pattern to make people angry all the time, anxious all the time? He goes, you most certainly could.
Sure. Yeah.
It's like, that's why this and aggressive. And you're talking about a pattern that is so fine that you can't even see it with a microscope. Like you would have no idea what you were looking for, which means they could have these little patterns hidden in your clothes, in the chairs at the McDonald's to make you hungry. Like, think of all the nefarious things you could do with such a fine pattern. People would be unaware that it was even there.
Sure.
Because, Anna, that's why no one must ever know. That's why I can't tell anybody.
Right. Well, plus, that's why our foods are full of chemicals, right? You know, what does it do? It makes us crave more. It's more savory. I want to overeat. It's like drives the behavior.
Correct. Yeah, but believe me, if a monetary venture could modulate your behavior, they would most 100% do it.
Yeah.
They would kill to do it, and I do pray for his health all the time because I'm like, dude, someone's going to. But he sees the vision that the physics of this technology is superior to the pharmacy of what we've been doing for thousands of years. And I think he's probably right about that, especially in an era where they're trying to get rid of physicians. The FDA just gave artificial intelligence a license to practice medicine that has been written into the constructs at the FDA, that artificial intelligence now has the right to diagnose, treat disease, and write prescriptions that will be honored throughout the nation. Like, they want to get rid of your doctors. And these algorithms always wind up with a pharmaceutical answer. There's lots of money to be had. These patches represent a huge threat to that sort of pathway of thought.
Right.
So certainly it's kind of a marketing uphill battle to get the which is why he has the type of marketing he has right now, this mid-level marketing. It's the only way to do it with what he has.